This time last year, I had my £30 million business stolen by two directors that I trusted. This is my story. I hope you learn from it. It is going to sound incredibly far-fetched, but for anyone who would like to read all of the evidence, the witness statements, everything associated with it, then it is all available to you. The one thing I've really learned in the last year is that the justice system in the UK is broken beyond belief, which has allowed the directors to get away with this, which is why I am publicly releasing this TikTok. Enjoy. So I founded a company called Videscape Limited in 2014. You could look it up on Companies House. I'm not going to mention any names, but the names of the directors are on there. My name is Thomas Oswald, the founder. So it was founded in 2014 as a video sharing platform. Had to pivot to a photo sharing platform because the USP that we had against YouTube was lost. It was something called YouTube Red, which was dropped, but that's largely irrelevant to this. Between 2014 and 2021, I grew the platform organically with no institutional investment to about £1.52 million of revenue, of which the profit margin was about 90%. Obviously, when a company is that sort of size, and it grew staggeringly fast during COVID, when a company is that sort of size, you have to start employing someone. So the first person I employed was our social media manager. Really good girl, did a fantastic job and continues to work for various companies today, still do a fantastic job. I then employed someone, a young woman who I'd known for a couple of years. She was brought on as a customer services representative. About a year later, we needed to bring a chief operations officer in, and we needed someone who could deal with the corporate side of businesses. So I'm not corporate. I know how to grow businesses, I know how to market them, and I know how to monetize them, but all the dotting the I's, T's, and all the really boring stuff, not my forte. Conveniently, I was approached by this law firm. They suggested that I interview this individual who claimed to have 25 years of experience, and if I interviewed him, it would be a really good thing to the business. Knew the owner of the law firm, and they used to walk their dogs together. I'm guessing that's how he got into that law firm in the first place. So we interviewed him and hired him. He came on. Within 11 days of being hired, he made our customer services girl a director of the company. I wasn't so sure about that at the time, because she had no experience as a director. She was 24. She had no track record of being involved in businesses. And when I queried him about it, he said it would look good to have her on a board. And given I'd hired this guy with 25 years of experience to create a board and make the company look valid, I went with what he said. Little did I realise that was the first step in how he was going to steal the business. So as the company went on, 2 months later, fired our own accountant we'd had for 2 or 3 years, really good London-based firm. He then brought in his own accountant, and he brought her in on the basis that she cost 25% of what our existing accountant cost. And of course, I had no real queries about that. I mean, our existing accountant was costing us £2,000 or £3,000 a month. This accountant was going to cost us £400, £500 a month. So I couldn't really legitimately turn that down. We were a growing startup. Whilst we had good money, throwing it away isn't a way to continue to grow the business. So she was brought in. Over the next year, the two directors started trying to keep me out of various aspects of the business. And this is the founder of the business. This is the person who grew that business to what it was today. It knows the business inside out. The two directors pushing me out, no track record in the business, no knowledge of the market, and that's largely why the company is insolvent as of today. To be honest, I largely ignored it. I was tired. I'd spent 10 years building this. I had acquired a chronic illness, and I knew I was the owner of the company. I owned the company by 77%. Kept promising the company was going to IPO. We were taken to London Stock Exchange, met some people there. Had a CFO come on, another contact of his, who claimed that we'd be IPOing for £30 million in first quarter of 2024. So I actually stepped back and said, all right, if you want to run the company, you run the company. I'm here for advice if you need it, and watch them get on. Another very bad mistake on my part. Anyhow, come November, there was a piece of software the company was trying to put in behind my back, which was a marketplace for selling images. Whilst it was a very good piece of software for the industry it was in, it was not good for our industry, namely because of user flows and so on and so on. I didn't know this software was being brought into the platform until quite late, and I was never given the opportunity to look at it, to test it. I was given this opportunity end of November, somewhere around the 20th of November, to look at it, and it was going to be a disaster for both companies. It was going to embarrass both companies significantly and result in losses to the business. So I threatened to fire this individual and the girl he'd made a director, because they were clearly not listening to me. They had no interest in the business longevity. They were basically after trying to get whatever they could into the company to make a quick buck, which is not what I do when I'm building companies. We want to build sustainable, long-lasting, good investments. So I threatened to fire them. Then over the next 2 or 3 months, started making inquiries for a replacement CEO and to replace the other girl that was there. And then in January of 2024, around, I think about, actually no, it would have been late January because it was around payday. So around 24th or 25th of January, I logged into the bank and I noticed that the female director was taking home almost £6,000 a month. Now, I knew that in May of 23, we had given pay rises to everyone, including her, and her pre-tax pay was 65k, which is definitely not over £6,000 a month after tax. So on the back of that, I went through the bank statements from May all the way through to January, and I discovered that the 4 staff in the office, because we had about, I think, somewhere between 20 and 25 staff at the time, but only 4 worked in the office, all of them had had massive pay rises since September of 23. They had been giving themselves pay rises almost every month, to the point where 2 of them, the female director and her friend, had over 100% pay rises. A male individual in the office had sort of like a £10,000 or £15,000 pay rise. And then, of course, the director who was behind all of that had a huge pay rise in January. It was quite clear, given the pattern of the payments, that they had been making small payments each month themselves, slowly increasing their payroll figures, which in a company that was making £200,000 or £300,000 a month at a time, that's quite easy to hide if you're not looking for it, which obviously I wasn't. And of course I trusted the directors. And I thought maybe the accountant would notice something like that. I immediately contacted the company lawyers, who are Taylor Wessing, and they said they'd come back to me. They never did. We then contacted a local lawyer firm, Thowens, gave them all the evidence, and we discovered that basically these 2 directors, had been committing gross misconduct, not only for theft, but incompetence and a whole host of other things as well. We got the letters done, and they were due to be sacked on the 19th of February. 24. I had to go away the week before for some business, and whilst I was away, I suddenly lost access to my emails, Slack communications, and removed from the Facebook group, and I was like, what the hell's going on? Then I received a letter from this director stating that I was to be immediately sacked for stealing £420,000 plus £200,000 from the business. And I was like looking at this and going, I have no idea what you're talking about. He and the other director, shortly after I threatened to sack them, had gone to the company's lawyers and had highlighted legitimate transactions and said, I've been stealing and embezzling money. And these included transactions that this director had made into my bank account himself for things like my bonus. Turns out, of course, the accountant was involved, and we discovered this again through contacting previous directors that had worked with him, again in the evidence pack. And so they removed me instantly. They weren't going to pay me my salary, and I apparently owed £420,000 to the bank, to the company. Looking at the claims, they put on things like our funding circle. So what they've done, as an example, funding circle is like a credit facility, a short-term credit facility for managing cash flow. So the auditors had come in, they'd gone out, got some independent auditors. The auditors come in, which I didn't know about and didn't deal with. He then showed them transactions that came up. So for example, Funding Circle, there's £175,000 of expenses. And all it shows you on the bank statements is £175,000 over a period of time that's gone out. You don't know what it's for. Of course, that money had been used to pay our lawyers, our developers, hardware that we use for the company, and so on and so on. How the auditors, they were called Knight Goodhead, how the auditors managed to legitimately put forward an audit without having any conversations with the individual who was supposedly stealing the money, I do not know. It shows there is a clear issue with the accounting systems in this country. Because they put this audit together, 450 grand, 420 grand. Anyway, so I'd apparently stolen that. And then the guy said, well, we're going to let HMRC know you've stolen all this money, the police, and so on and so on. But we want you to come and meet us in 2 weeks where you can explain, and we're going to review your directorship. And I was like, I'm not meeting you. Why would I meet two directors who had clearly gone to great lengths to fabricate an awful lot of evidence at great company cost, remove the company from me? And I am fairly certain, and this is an allegation and conjecture, I'm fairly certain their plan was to meet me in our office and basically say, we've got this proof you've stolen all this money, you've got no access to anything, so you can't prove it's not true, and therefore we want your shareholding. And 77% of a £30 million company is a lot of shareholding. So I said, not a fucking chance, mate. Immediately said, we're going to call a vote. We're going to call a vote right now. The company refused to call a vote, unsurprisingly. So I then took the company to court. We had them in court on the 22nd of February. The judge said their position was completely untenable and that they were to call a vote immediately, or they gave them 30 days, because they then lied to the court saying there was a share dispute, which of course they knew there wasn't, but I didn't have access to my emails to prove otherwise. So the judge forced them to call a vote by the end of March. On the 5th of March, some of the shareholders asked for a Facebook group to be started up so that we could present our cases to the shareholders. Later that day, on the 5th of March, I was arrested by the police for fraud by abuse of position, claiming that I had stolen £420,000 from the business in embezzlement and fraud. So he had presented all of the false evidence to the police, and they then put me on bail. And unfortunately, the bail conditions meant that I could not be part of the Facebook group, be part of the vote, or even place a vote, or attend the vote, because it would be breach of my bail. So we lost the vote, unsurprisingly. However, there's something to note here, is when I was arrested, I was held in a cell for most of the night. They raided our house and actually took the computer and the evidence pack showing that all of the claims were false. So from the day of my arrest, the police had all of the evidence to show that all of the claims were false, that the allegations had been fabricated. We're now a year on. My bail wasn't released until September, and I'm still, or rather they wanted to drop it about a month and a half ago, but the director made a complaint to the police again when they said they want to drop it, to hold the case open, so that of course we couldn't immediately call another vote saying there's no evidence here of any theft. The police have dropped it. A quick thing I do want to mention here is that shortly after the vote was forced by the court, the company appointed two non-executive directors who, unfortunately, because of my bail conditions, couldn't talk to me, and they spent the entire month phoning up every shareholder that was loyal to me and convincing them that in fact I was a fraud and a theft and had stolen from the business. 9 months later, when my bail conditions were dropped and I got to speak to them, we presented the cases to them, and they've both resigned since. In May, I filed an unfair dismissal case against my own company, and we had the first tribunal for that a couple of weeks ago, and the company lied to the lawyers to make it out that I wasn't an employee of the company that I single-handedly built, and that I provided no value to the business, which I find is absolutely impeccably unbelievable. Now, he knows that's lies, because that's all he does is lie. But what it does do, of course, is it meant that there was another court case in September, which instead of being one where all the truth would have come out, meant that actually it was just 30 grand to determine whether I was an employee or not. Then we'd have to wait another 6 months for the unfair dismissal case itself, both of which are very easily winnable. He then tried to get a no-win, no-fee debt collector on me to collect a director's loan that had also been fabricated. It turned out that him and the accountant behind the scenes had been putting on my bonus, our social media manager girl's wages, an outboard motor he'd bought, the company's film equipment, the company's video cam, basically any expense that he could that I'd made, he put on my director's loan account over the year that he'd been, or over the last year that we'd been doing for the company. So he'd fabricated a director's loan account to the value of almost £320,000, which they then he then managed to convince a debt recovery company to come after me. And I find it astounding that this guy who owns 0.1% of the business managed to convince the police to arrest me and hold me on bail, has convinced a no-win, no-cut debt company to try and come after me, and convinced the shareholders to vote against me using the falsified audit. So, Knight Goodhead have a lot to answer for. We'll be finding out at some point in the future how they managed to do an audit and officially do an audit without the involvement of the founder and a director of the company. We have a breach of fiduciary duties against the two directors. That's due later this year. Unfortunately, the unfair dismissal case has been dropped because, of course, there's no company to have it against. And the police now have about 1,500 pages of evidence showing the two directors have committed extensive levels of fraud. The question is, will anything happen? And given my experience so far, I don't think the police will do anything. They'll let him carry on do this. He's been through 28 companies so far, destroying many lives in the process. The girl was groomed. She's probably had her life destroyed, but a lot of that's her own fault. The courts, what he'll do is he'll just lie again and again and again. There doesn't, one thing I've noticed is evidence doesn't seem to really matter these days. It's like we have all of this evidence that everything is false, and we could get more. I mean, when I was cut off from my emails and company communications, of course, the evidence in there's reams of it. And it says a lot about building companies in the UK. You can't really trust anyone by the sound of it. If you want justice, you're not going to get it. If someone decides to steal your company, like this individual has to me, and destroyed it, there will likely be limited repercussions to them. In my opinion, the country is so broken now that crime, particularly financial crime like this, will continue and get worse and worse and worse, and we're now in a deteriorating spiral. But this is my story. If you're involved in a business and someone approaches you and you come across this video, please check out Videscape Limited. Please check out the directors. If you want more evidence, PM me. I'll send you all of the evidence we have. I don't want the failing justice system in this country to let individuals like this destroy another person's life, jobs, dreams, career, reputation, or financially. Now, back to tractors.